Bringing hers so you can use hers.
Might have stuck it in
Yes,
something.
I did too, so we're good. Good afternoon and welcome to the June Department of Social Services meeting. At this time, I'd like to call the meeting to order and observe a moment of silent prayer or silent meditation. Amen. Susan, anybody signed up to speak? No. Okay. So, any changes to the agenda?
We need to add a budget amendment. I think a copy of it is at everybody's place regarding the parent-partner budget and Casey monies in the amount of $10,000.
So, parent-partner budget amendment from the Casey Foundation.
And it would go to the commissioners before y'all's next meeting, so that's why we needed to go ahead and do it.
Do we have a second to add this to the agenda?
I second it.
All those in favor of adding it to the agenda? What, first, are there other changes to the agenda besides adding that budget
Move
amendment?
approval. Second.
Okay. All right, so all those in favor of adopting the agenda as
As
amended?
amended, yes.
Let it be known by saying aye.
Aye.
In your packet, you had the minutes from the previous meeting. Are there any changes needed to those minutes? If not, do we have a motion to adopt them?
I move that we adopt the minutes as is.
From the May meeting, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Okay. Appropriately seconded by either Coral or Jim. So all those in favor of adopting the minutes as presented in our packet, let it be known by saying aye.
Aye.
Okay. In the original package, in your consent item, you had a Duke Energy neighbor-to-neighbor funds donation budget amendment for $517. And then I want Jan to speak to the Casey Partner one real quick.
Okay.
And then maybe we can adopt both budget amendments as part of the consent agenda.
The Casey Partner let me start over. The Casey Family Programs Parent-Partner project that we have here in Pitt County is a grant of $10,000. There are no county funds involved. It was received from the Casey Family Programs, and we use this to provide a variety of services to families to either prevent or preserve the family in CPS kinds of cases, and if not, try to reunify the family if we can and where we can. So we're requesting approval to add that budget amendment.
Like that.
So we have two budget amendments. If there are no other questions, do we have a motion to approve
I move
the two
approval.
budget amendments
I
on
like that.
consent? Is there a second?
I second.
We're all fighting for seconds today. So all those, it's been properly moved and seconded. All those in favor, please let it be known by saying aye.
Aye.
Okay, so your budget amendments are approved. The next item on our agenda is an item for discussion, and it's the child care policy.
Right.
And
And
that's you.
that's me to begin with, and I have lots of partners out in the audience who are going to serve as resource people for us. That would be Michelle McCorkle, who is representing Work First today, although she also manages the child care program. Angela Hart in finance, Kathy Parker, who is chief of child care, and Tammy Lewis might get into this because we may be talking about child protective services and foster care as it relates to child care and whatever decisions that we make. You have a copy of a letter at your place that indicated that the state has determined that they're going to deny what we did earlier in March. They have rescinded their approval, and they are now saying that we need to provide subsidized care for children up through age 12. And I know I sent out to you in the package, and some of you had a chance to read it and some of you haven't, sort of a summary of what's transpired, and I also have some information out there sort of summarizing some of what the federal government has done, but we've got a slideshow we're going to run through. Let me first say that on May the 2nd, we were notified about a need to participate in a conference call. The conference call was held May the 9th. We were notified there that our policy reducing the age limit would not be allowed, and that we might even, in fact, be committing age discrimination by terminating children at age 9. They advised we could not cut anyone off outside the ages outlined in the federal policy. Although there was some discussion about the fact they'd already approved our plan, and some discussion about the fact that there would not be funding to cover all these children, and that the waiting list was going to continue to grow, we were informed that that would not change anything. They did suggest that they would provide funding to cover the shortfall. However, they would not put that in writing. So that creates kind of a problem for us. I asked for additional information, so this is some of what they sent us. And then I went out on the federal website and picked up the slide presentation. When we reviewed our information about how many children we had that would turn 9 or 10 during the upcoming fiscal year, we found that was 177 children. The cost of that, depending on how long they were in that age bracket and a variety of things, we guesstimated somewhere between $750,000 and $1 million. That would depend on, you know, what type of center they were in, the cost of that center, so on and so forth. But 750 seems to be about as low as we're going to be able to go with that. And that wasn't projected, obviously, in our current funding. And we don't know what the projected rate increases might be in the state budget. There is some money in the state budget in different places. The Senate has some money for Tier 2 county rate increase. The House has some money for Tier 1 counties rate increase. We don't know what the percentage rate increase or the dollar rate increase might be on any of those, and of course the budget's not passed yet. We had a Work First review, and they were not happy with us because we were not providing child care for people to do job search who were in Work First, and wrote us up for that. And we knew that we should provide child care because we can't expect people to do job search, et cetera, when they have children under the age of 5 without providing some type of child care. But because we were overspending our budget, that was a group we chose not to bring in. Because if they find a job, which is a great thing, we have to continue the child care for their children while they're working.
Is this like on a sliding, as they have increased over time, we'd slide back?
As
That's what I
the wages increase, the fee amount will get larger. So their amount that they're paying grows and our amount shrinks. Yes. And we've got 151 children as of last month that were waiting for Work First slots. And we haven't put anybody on in Work First since October. So, let's run through the slides, which gives you an idea of how we got to this spot. And you have a copy of the slides in your packet. In 2014, Congress reauthorized the Child Care Development Block Grant. And it was a wonderful thing. I mean, they're doing some really great things. There was not enough money put with it to cover what needed to be done. Next slide. So the purpose was to protect the health and safety of children, help parents make informed consumer choices, and give them access to information, provide equal access to stable, high-quality care, and enhance the quality of the care for the children. The law established a minimum 12-month eligibility period, regardless of any temporary changes in the parent's status, such as working or attending job training or education, and the family income cannot exceed 85% of the state median income. And Kathy can explain all that to you if we get to that discussion, because I don't know what that dollar figure is. The final rule clarifies that the minimum 12-month eligibility applies to initial and subsequent eligibility periods. We cannot shorten the authorization period within the minimum 12-month eligibility period. And the federal law says that they're calling it co-payments, but the parent fees cannot be raised during the eligibility period. So the next slide. Any time-limited absence from work, which is a good thing, won't relieve them from getting daycare. Any interruption due to seasonal work, et cetera, won't stop them from getting daycare. Any student holiday or break doesn't stop them from getting daycare. And any other cessation of work or attendance at training or education programs, as long as it doesn't exceed 3 months, doesn't stop them from getting daycare. And you can have multiple 3 months during your 12-month certification period of being out of work, and you would still be able to receive child care. So the final rule that came up was that it requires that a child retain their eligibility until the next redetermination, regardless of any change in age, including turning 13 years old during the eligibility period. So as I read that, because you go through age 12, as I read that, if your eligibility was redetermined in December and on January you turn 13, you got that whole year of eligibility for child care. Or any change in residency, and I don't know that that's a big issue for us. The lead agency, and let me point out, the lead agency is the state. We are agents of the state, so the state gets to make all these determinations. The only reasons that we can shorten eligibility would be if you've got excessive unexplained absences, a change in residency outside of the state, or substantiated fraud or intentional program violation, which would be that you weren't trying to commit fraud but did tell us a story. Moving on. We are not allowed to deal with reporting or whatever. Reporting requirements are changes that impact a child's federal eligibility, so your income gets over 85% of SMI, and that is when families must report, and information that impacts a local agency's ability to communicate with parents or providers. So if you move, for example, you need to let us know that. We cannot require an office visit. They can do a whole range of different options for getting their recertifications done. And the examples are there: phone, email, extended hours. They still have to sign things, but they can do that a variety of ways. Because again, we're talking working folk, and typically a lot of these folks are working when we're working, so you don't want them to, have to leave work in order to do the eligibility. This gives us some idea about what they can do during the eligibility reporting period. A non-temporary change in work or job training or education status, they should report to us. And they can report at any time. We have to act on things that are beneficial to the family. So if their income goes down, we should act on that because that could make their fee be less. But if their income goes up, then we're kind of not doing much with that because that could go the other way. So we have to evaluate at the redetermination. This is what the federal law, optional termination. You get, however, at least 3 months of continued assistance after the loss of the job or attendance or whatever. So that continuation is required. There's no requirement to collect documentation. If by the end of the 3-month period the parents again engaged in eligible work, then the assistance can't be terminated. You can still use job search status as an initial qualifying activity, which is where the work first folks would come in, and you would provide that assistance at least for 3 months, and then it would continue if the parent becomes eligible due to work or education or training. And then there's graduated phase out, and this may require more help from Kathy to fully explain. But graduated phase out means that a family gets a full eligibility period under the same conditions as a typical eligibility period. You can increase co-payments during the graduated phase out. And it, again, 85, in North Carolina, to be eligible for daycare, you're at 133% of poverty, or 200% of poverty is the basic eligibility level if you're below that. 133% is for children over the age of 5, and Kathy, I'm getting into policy here, and the 200% is for children 5 and under. Once you hit 5, we go to the 133%. So we understand that the cost of child care for very young children is much higher. So, and then this new element now, which is the 85% of the state median income. We're definitely getting in the weeds here, but just give you a little bit of understanding about why this is so different for everybody. And then there's a graduated phase-out discussion with the flow chart, et cetera. But it's given the family a chance to move through the process without an unnecessary disruption in their child care. Okay, Susan, you want to go on? And we're going to skip the flow chart because you can't. And then there's a group of questions and answers, and and that's in the what you got, that even if you collect information in advance of the 12-month eligibility period, you can't act on it, and a variety of things like that. So the family's not required to provide any supporting documentation during the 3 months of continued assistance. So there's a variety of things there. Basically, and we can skip through all those, Susan, basically where we are right now is that it will be very difficult once a family gets approved for child care that they will come off of child care. And again, people have people have periods of unemployment. You don't want to say just because you lost your job for a little while, you got to go now back to the waiting list to the end of the line while you find another. I mean, these are all family-friendly policies that are very good. But again, the money was not put there to support all of these changes. And so most states are seeing that their waiting lists are growing significantly. And as you saw from that, there's hardly any way you can terminate somebody prior to the end of their 12 months eligibility period, or depending on what, they've got to be making a pretty good income. And Kathy, can you share with folks, if you come to the mic, or if you can get somebody to, about what 85% of income of SMI would be for a family of 3, and compare that to the poverty levels and stuff?
Here's our chart that we use, and I'll let everybody get a copy of it.
Yeah, move.
Scoot to your right. Thank you.
I want to know where the money's coming from. They didn't fund it. Where's the money coming from?
Well, we're not allowed to terminate even if we don't have funding. That's one of the things that we've been
Where's the
told.
money coming from?
So, that's a good question.
You have magic.
That's that money tree in my backyard. So Kathy's trying to give you an idea of what the income situation looks like, and we don't need to be an eligibility specialist, but just to give them a sense of kind of the different dollar kinds of things we're looking at now compared to what we used to look at.
So if a client comes in for her yearly recertification, and I'm going to give you an example. It's a mama and 1 child, which is a family size of 2, and let's say the child's 4. If she's over the 200% for a family size of 2, which is 2,655, then we compare her to the 85%. Now, if she's over the 85%, she terminates within at the end of the eligibility period. But if she's under the 85% but over the 200%, she gets 3 months to phase out. And this is at her yearly recertification. So it's like if you're over this one, this chart, we still have this other chart, this 85% chart to look at.
So it's gotten much more complicated, is what I wanted to point out to everybody.
Jan,
Yes, ma'am.
how are you going to keep up with everybody's continuing eligibility fraud? I mean, this is really,
Well, in the past, we used to do 3-month check-ins with folks.
yeah.
They were recertified every 6 months, and, we could move folks along pretty
Yeah.
quickly that way. There is no longer that requirement. So basically, what we're gonna be tracking now is their 12-month certification period, and
Right,
that's
it's
pretty
12
much it, right, Kathy?
And matter of fact, we even ask about doing quarterly updates, and it's not allowed.
It's not allowed?
You
Uh-uh.
know, when you go
We
back
have
there,
an
it
email.
says basically, once you've said they're good,
They're
they're
good.
good for 12 months.
Right.
Right.
It's not allowed. We ask about doing it.
Well, let's say that somebody came in and tattled on somebody, and you found, do you have the right to follow up on a tattle?
I'd have to ask about that, but I know we're not allowed to send out those quarterlies anymore. If it's fraud, maybe we could follow up on it, but we can't just periodically say, hey, we want you to turn in your stubs to see that you're still working here. Quarterly reports are not allowed. That's in a new admin letter. Probably came out over 6 months ago.
Can you have contact with the employer?
I doubt it. I don't know. I mean, I
Not-
would think that'd be the same as a quarterly.
Not outside of the eligibility redetermination, you can't. No, no. So we're relying on the family to report to us. Now, if we find that there was fraud during that process, we can pursue it.
But only if it were fraud during the determination of eligibility period.
Well,
I mean, time, at
Yeah,
the
I
time.
mean-
Is there something that requires them to report that life became better for them?
Yeah, there is an agreement that they sign every year that they agree to report changes within 5 days, increase or decrease of income.
Every 5 days of what?
Within five,
days.
within 5 days, sorry, within 5
Of the
days.
change or of,
They're required to report it. But,
but if you're not gonna enforce it,
I mean, I can't periodically just send out the quarterlies and see if you forgot to report a change. But they do sign agreement to report those changes, and then we look at the chart.
And again, at the point in time we do the redetermination, we would be getting income information at that point. And if it was found that they had exceeded what they were allowed to have, then we could go back and deal with the overpayment at that
And
point
send it to fraud.
and send it to the fraud folks, right?
But I can't just send out quarterlies and say, I know it's during the year your recertification, your year's not up yet to come in, but I'm just spot checking. I need your pay stubs to make sure you're still at the same place, making the same amount. We're not allowed to do
you're not
that.
allowed to do that. Okay, let's say that a child is being followed by Pitt County DSS. And the social worker comes to you and says that she's aware that something has changed. Can you listen to her?
Well, in those cases where we have custody or at CPS daycare, the income doesn't even count.
But I mean, no, I'm talking about like in working with families that have the children still in the home, family preservation.
I'm thinking we could.
For example, if they reported to food stamps, which would be an example, and I doubt people would be reporting to food stamps if we find that a lot of folks don't report to food stamps either, and we do go after that.
Right, and-
So, you know, if we've got a social worker in the home, it's because it's Child Protective Services. And so again, as Kathy said, income is not the issue there. The issue there is, are they still receiving Child Protective Services? Are they still going to daycare? You know, are they still needing that service? And so that would not be of
So when eligibility wouldn't be a question there.
wouldn't be a question there. And at the point they leave protective services, if they are employed, then they can still they can still receive child care after the protective service issue goes away, if there is an employment or a training program that they're involved with that they need child care for. Yeah. So, I mean, basically what I want to give you was an idea of what the landscape is and why we're having this discussion. The other thing I wanted to share with you, and then I've got a couple of ideas, and I want y'all, this is the board's work here to help me kind of figure out where we're headed and what kind of cover you're going to give me here. Just to let you know, this past year, we spent a total of $22,000, $22,112.90 in childcare. Our original allocation was $9,308,359. We received an additional allocation of $395, almost $400,000. And then the rest of that money came from the county through our maintenance of effort spending or underspending in other budget areas that were removed, so that we did not have to terminate children this year.
So what was the balance after you added all this up?
After I added it all up, it was $10,022,000.
Right, but
Okay.
once you-
What was the county amount?
Yes.
$700,498. Okay. So, right now, for the last payment month, we believe about $750,000 a month, if we did nothing, would be about how much we would spend a month. And that would mean what we do right now is people drop off and we're not replacing them. But we are still adding CPS and foster care cases where we can document that that's a need that's out there.
Not gonna be
So if we go with $750,000, that means we're gonna need about $9 million next year.
Not gonna be enough.
But that doesn't deal with teen parents, and that doesn't deal with Work First.
Not gonna be enough.
So Angela's done some work, and she can explain what she's done to give you some sense of money, if there's anything you can add.
Okay. I went back and just did a comparison because I figured y'all would probably want this information. For the fiscal year of 2015-16 in subsidy, our allocation that we received was $7,497,822. We did not have to request any additional funds, and we ended up spending only $7,368,879, which left us a balance of $128,943 that went back to the state. Well, for 16-17, we received an initial allocation of $8,071,851. We got the notification that we weren't going to be able to terminate children, weren't going to be able to get them off there because of their age, and it looked like we were getting ready to get into some overspending issues. So we requested a reallocation, and the state gave us $395,881 to give us a total for this year of $8,467,732. When it was all said and done, we actually spent $8,497,842, which was an overspending of $30,110. But I was able to contact the state and tell them how much the overage was going to be and request that they cover it, and they agreed to cover that overage. In our Smart Start for 2015-16, we got $771,934, and we spent $771,929. For 16-17, we received $824,009, and we actually spent $824,008. So we gave them $1 back. But for county funds, for 15-16, there were no county funds involved because we did not have a need for them. But for 16-17, we ended up doing $700,498 of all county funds. So with all of that said, we had an increase from the 15-16 year to 16-17 of $1,181,042. So that was just to give you a little overview of what the cost is going to, how it's going to affect us. And just for your knowledge, we have got 1,553 children on the waiting list. And when we started out in June,
How many on the waiting list?
1,553. And that's up from June of 899. And if you got any more questions, I'd be glad to answer them.
Okay, so now you kind of have the lay of the land. We don't know what the state's gonna do from a monetary standpoint. We believe we could continue to go as we're going with adding a few foster care kids and a few CPS kids and be okay. We would not overspend if we kept doing that. but that would not address teen parents, and that would not address the Work First kids. We could use MOE to help with the Work First kids, but 151 Work First kids right off the bat is
Right.
gonna be a significant sum of money. Again, not knowing based on where they would wind up going and what all their ages were and that kind of thing. But if 177 children were gonna be $750,000, and those were after schoolers, I mean, you can kind of do some math there. So, and again, we've got the assurance from the state to some degree that they will make sure. And in this year's budget, I will say that the legislature, unlike the last couple of years, has put aside some money, roughly 4%, for the state to use for overspending, to cover overspending. Now, 4% of the total state pot of money, state and federal pot of money is a pretty hefty sum of money, but again, we're not the biggest spender out of this group, and you see what we spent. So, we know that some counties have quit providing child care to children on CPS at all. They've just quit. We know that counties are making all kinds of decisions to try and hold the line on spending. We're doing everything we can to hold the line on spending. So some of the things that we've sort of brainstormed about are that we refuse to accept the state's letter and keep on trucking, which is probably not an option since that would be violating, apparently law and policy. And I saw the manager do like this.
Do you agree that we should do that, right?
So Jen,
That's what that means?
Since every county in the state's dealing with this, I would imagine the majority of counties have gotten a similar letter.
Well, no, because Pitt County was probably one of few counties in the state that had been spending pretty heavily their allocation for many years and had slowly worked down in the age range, but there are several that had done that. And again, in talking with one of the counties, I mean, they've stopped doing CPS. They are not doing but a couple of foster care a month. They're limiting what they would do. This was a county that was overspending by $5 million. They are not doing a whole lot with Work First. I mean, their county they're meeting with their commissioners to put in additional dollars. I mean, there's a lot of things going on from that standpoint. Some counties are having trouble spending their allocations. So, they don't have enough daycare centers maybe to meet the need. Maybe a center, I know Dare County had a center that closed last year, and it was a large center, and so that dropped all those children out, and it took them a while for a new center to come in, pick that slack up, so they underspent for last year, but that would not be their norm. Normally, they come in about even. So, we could risk the bailout. We could stop adding any children. We could add only the number that were removed the prior month. We could continue to do foster care, CPS, add Work First, teen parents, or any combination thereof. Continue to budget the county MOE dollars, which we will do because we need to budget the MOE dollars and spend the MOE dollars to be in line with that law. But we have never spent that many MOE dollars just on child care. We've used MOE dollars in other places in the agency. Or we could go to the county commissioners, obviously not this year because the budget's done, and propose, we hang on this year and propose that the county start providing some type of match to our budget for child care over and above what we do with MOE. Those were the things that we, as we talked, could come up with. So I thought and wanted to get input from the board as to what they saw as priorities and how they felt like we needed to proceed.
Is there a benchmark out there? So if your budget is 10 million and 750,000 of it is MOE dollars, so 7.5% of your budget is local dollars to daycare. Is there a industry standard that in other daycare budgets, counties are putting in 5% of the funds or 8% of the funds or 15% of the funds?
No.
Or no funds because they're living only on those other dollars?
in years past, we've all lived only on those dollars, or pretty much only on those dollars.
Right.
If you get a reallocation because you're overspending, you have to put up
It's a 25%.
$25,000 as match for any reallocation that you get from
But
county
at
money.
some point, the occasional overspending in error, or because enough kids didn't graduate off, becomes an intentional overspending if you avoid
Right.
fixing the problem.
Right.
And at some point, they say, you knew you were gonna spend it, I'm not gonna bail you out.
Right. And
So-
that threat, there have been probably 10 to 15 counties in the state that have intentionally overspent every year because the state always bailed them out, okay? And so that's part of what happened, I think, with the language in the budget, that they would not put any money in there. I
Right.
mean, I'm not the legislator, I don't know what that thinking was, but my guess is, based on all those discussions, was that we weren't gonna put any money aside to bail people out. People needed to live within their budgets.
Right.
Pitt County was never one of those counties. I mean, they might be a little off one year or another, 20, 30,000, something like that. But generally, Pitt spent, they managed their budget.
Right, because you had the authority to make some changes.
Right.
Well, now they've stripped you.
Right.
It's kinda like Medicaid, where you have no
Right.
way to control who's eligible, you just have to pay the freight
Right.
when the bill comes.
The only difference in this and an entitlement is that I don't have to put people on. Otherwise, it's like an entitlement.
Right.
You
Right.
have to keep them while you got them.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Well, recognizing the possibility that there'll be kids that could be in the program as high as 13 years of age from the situation scenario, it seems to me to make good sense to just have to go with your option of, as children finally age out, then ones on the waiting list would be placed in those now vacant spots. And then, as hopefully, if there are grants, or if there are, as money comes available from the legislature that can be poured into that area, that would open up increasingly more slots to fill.
I doubt, my guess is that with CPS, foster care, teen parents, and Work First, we will never get to the people on the waiting list,
Right.
because they will keep all of those slots going, and slightly more than that would be my guess.
Well, will the
'Cause
ones
we're-
on the waiting list, would they be funneled into one of those categories
If
eventually?
they qualified for one of those categories, and there are a couple of things I can share. One is that, and I just lost one of them. The waiting list, you've got to be either Work First eligible to get into there, which means you've got to be receiving cash assistance in order to get the Work First money. You've got to have a CPS report, which is part of why one of the counties has decided no longer to serve CPS folks, because she noted that people were doing anonymous reports on themselves, because they automatically put people because they'd get an application to go on the waiting list, and then they'd say you're on the waiting list, and then a month or two later, there'd be a CPS report on this person. It would usually be anonymous, and the staff automatically, without assessing anything, gave them child care. In Pitt County, we don't do that. In Pitt County, we assess whether child care is going to help with the Child Protective Services issue that we have. So, because this county was overspending so dramatically, I will use the old adage, baby with the bathwater, they just threw it all out and said, we're just gonna stop that as being a portal to come in to childcare. So, foster parents, I mean, that will be difficult for most folks to fit into. So I'm thinking most folks who generally are coming, and we get calls a lot from people who say, well, I guess I'll have to quit my job and go on welfare in order to qualify for daycare. And I understand, because right now up until recently, that was one way. If you were on public assistance and you went and did job search, et cetera, again, it's not it's not the right way to go after it because you're hurting yourself in the long run. But when childcare costs as much as it does, it is very difficult for working parents to afford it when they're going in to jobs. We drop about 30 kids a month off of the rolls right now due to either age or due to the parents not coming in for a recertification. I'm watching Kathy shake her head. We are putting on about 20 kids a month through Work First. And we haven't put anybody on lately. But if we did, based on the numbers that are out there, it would probably be about 20 a month. In CPS and foster care, you're putting on less than 10 probably, most months. So the numbers are close. They're close.
And you don't have the authority to change the amount you pay on somebody's behalf.
No,
That's a set so
Right.
much of,
right.
and you don't have the authority to encourage them to go to a more affordable daycare. They can still pick.
It's
the most
parental
ex-
choice. Now, one thing that is out there that may help us is that in the budget, there is an expansion of more at 4. So if we can move some of our 4-year-olds into more at 4, that could free up some slots. And in fact, hope to have a meeting shortly to have that discussion because Lisa Mulligan and I from Smart Start were talking the other day. If there is in fact a rate increase, the state will give us some money to cover that rate increase. So I don't need to worry about that in this general discussion, but it would be an issue to be aware of.
So what's wrong with us saying only replace via attrition, which is where Coral was going with the, as kids drop off, and make your priority area Work First and CPS kids, unless and until you get some additional funds over and above what you would normally get?
I totally agree with that.
Well, what about the foster parent issue? If they, with those kids, and these parents have them in their homes, and a lot of times both of those parents are working, why would they not get some sort of
Yeah, I mean, and it
something
could
in
be the
there?
foster parents as well, but it's just, that becomes your 3 focus areas, and unfortunately, the only way somebody comes off the wait list is if you got additional dollars from somewhere.
And we probably don't get but a few teen parents a year, Kathy, is that true?
I would say probably less than 20 a year teen parents.
About how many foster children?
New ones throughout
Maybe 3 a month, maybe 4. It just goes in cycles.
Any particular age more prevalent within the foster care population that y'all get?
I don't see not a whole lot of infants. Usually they're
older kids.
They're above infants, but we provide that right off the bat. They're not on the waiting list. As
They
long
have
as
not been
foster
on the
parent-
waiting list.
Right, they're not on the waiting list. As long as a foster parent's working or doing something, they never go on the waiting list. And Child Protective Services, as long as that has been staffed with a supervisor and they say there's a need, they never go on a waiting list.
So how do you accommodate not having a waiting list and not having the money in the slots to put the child in daycare?
Well, I would say right now, we have a huge waiting list that does not include foster children,
Right.
children in Child Protective Services, but it includes everybody else.
Right.
We have not put a teen parent on in a while. We had 2 that were getting ready to graduate from high school and they just needed a month or 2. We paid it out of county general assistance because we did not want these children to not graduate. So we've not had a huge outcry from that standpoint, but we've not put anybody in from Work First. They've gone on the waiting list.
But you're saying you could accommodate just through the natural loss of 30 right now you're only using 10 or so of them with the foster care CPS, so you could add 20 work first.
We could,
If you
we
reserve
think,
those other freed up slots for work first.
we think it would be real close.
And what would happen to Pitt County if we decided to be selective in terms of who we served in daycare?
At some point, there would have to be some reckoning, I'm sure, by the state and perhaps even the federal folks. There could, in fact, be, somebody suing us. I don't know. At the same time, I still have a question about how legally folks can bind us to having to pay for children
Right.
when we don't have the
Right.
money. And it dawned on me the other night that technically it's the lead agency that is being bound. It is not me that is being bound for not having the money.
Well, we know how
But we
things
do
flow
know how things
downhill.
trickle down. So, the lead agency is who's got to come up with the money. So we need to hold the state's feet to the fire, in my opinion, to do the bare
ain't gonna
bones of what we've got to do. If we start taking kids off of our regular waiting list, then I can assure you the state will start yelling at us about that too. Because they've been telling counties, even underspending counties lately, do not add children from your waiting list because we need the money to cover the counties that were overspending.
And it
So-
seems to me that I appreciated the point you made in your memorandum that the plan that we submitted had previously been approved
Right,
by the state.
right.
So since they could see where we were justified in our reasoning, that they should be accountable if they want us to change what they already approved, they should be responsible to finance what we have to do. So that would be part of holding their feet to the fire, right?
So,
It's very dismal.
So,
I need a recommendation so that I know how to move forward.
my recommendation, which may not be seconded, would then be to, as children naturally come off, those approximately 30 slots a month, your focus becomes CPS, foster care, and work first. You address the true wait list only with new dollars, and you continue to ask Raleigh, how do you implement this federal rule without additional funds to do it?
What's the consequences for the stuff that they didn't like that we did?
You're talking about moving it back to 9 years of age, what are the consequences? Eventually, there would be some consequences, they probably would,
So they're
come
gonna
and
punish
meet
you?
with the county, they would probably write us up, they would probably ultimately demand, that we do this. But again, that would take a while before they moved that far. They would make it very uncomfortable, let's put it that way.
May I say something?
Yes, ma'am.
Also, for a long time, we cut children off at age 10. It's been a couple of years or more.
2014 or earlier.
Yeah, and now all of a sudden they're saying not only do you not cut them off at age 9, you up it back to age 12. And so I don't know what's going on there, but for a long time, we've been through audits. They have approved it for age 10, and now they're saying no, back up to 12. So.
I think it has
And
to
that's
do
all
with the new-
related, that's
the
all
new
related
people
to
in
this
the
new
legislature.
federal legislation, is what's driving this.
I think it's the new people in the legislators.
So Jan, the reluctance to put it in writing, it sounds like you made that case.
And that was reluctance from the feds
No,
to put
that-
it in writing. or
I'm
from the
making it to
state.
the state, because I don't get to interact with the feds. The state is who the feds
Is
recognize.
there any, since they said they would, is there any way to pursue that further in terms of making decisions, how important that would be?
We can certainly put that in writing back to them, that we had this discussion, that this is where we are. and that we would not be taking children off the waiting list, only we would do this group, and that if this group could not be accommodated with the new rules that they've given us from afar, we would expect them to assist in reimbursing.
Do you think they will accept that?
I don't know that the department is in a position to actually write that kind of a letter back, but going on record, I think, makes us stronger than just the verbal conversation I've already had.
And my thinking about this is that, I mean, there are children that are more at risk. And I think we need to make sure that some way we always take that into consideration.
Right. And we're not stopping the work that I've been trying to do with the community to try and figure out ways to serve more children in Pitt County, because we do have such a large waiting list. So that work is ongoing, separate and apart from this discussion.
Is it also possible to combine that with taking statistics as they occur this year to approach the county commission to have, help from the county budget in the next budget approval session? You'll have all this situation that you'll be able to present to the county commission from this year, because this year it's a done deal anyway. So for the next budget, the upcoming, you'll be able to say, this is what we've been dealing with this year, and we need to, is there a way you can help with matching funds or whatever's possible in the county budget? I was wondering also, do churches or other community organizations, do they have any kind of daycare facility that they would be willing to partner with us to pick up some of that slack?
Some churches do have childcare facilities. Some of them participate, again, I'm looking at Kathy, but some of them participate in subsidies, some of them do not. I know that in talking with some of the folks that I've talked with, some of the churches do have some slots that they kind of absorb through scholarships or whatever. Most folks have to keep the lights on and the doors open, and so they're only able to subsidize by so much what they do. One of the things that as part of this waiting list discussion is the plan to meet with the providers, but we were waiting till we got through the NC Fast installation to do that, because I want them to focus right now on NC Fast, and we need to have this discussion as a separate issue. Relating how we could work better together, and could there be a couple of scholarship slots in every facility, and some of that kind of thing, because sometimes they might have maybe 9 children in a room, and they could accommodate 10 children in the room, and it's going to cost them the same thing pretty much. Could they maybe do something in some way to help with that? But that's a conversation that NC Fast, has rolled out very slowly, so hopefully we can have that conversation early this fall.
So how do we put this all in a motion that would incorporate those? I'm hearing like 3 or 4 different points.
Well, on the budget piece, clearly we would be gathering data as we go along, and as we get to budget season, we could have that conversation as a board separate and apart from this conversation, to decide if we feel strongly enough
As a
that's
priority
warranted
for next year's
for
budget.
next year's budget. So that could be something we could kind of table for later in this year, after we've got some data.
Well, if Melanie's motion is still on the table.
No, it doesn't have a
Okay.
second.
Huh?
I said no, because it doesn't have a second.
Well, it has my second. I
Okay.
wanted there to be discussion before I said second to be closed.
You seconded it, then you have your
Okay, well, I
discussion. So we've done the
definitely-
backwards order, but that's okay.
I definitely second Melanie's motion.
Did you
And-
make that,
And my motion simply for those 3 groups was because we're getting hammered, because we're not doing the work first that we need to.
Yeah.
And in order to address that piece, then to me, that's gotta be the group you let in the door.
Yeah.
And the wait list is unfortunate that it doesn't look like it's gonna, you know, that's your ammunition to argue for more dollars from Raleigh, and that our general allocation should be bigger because we've got as many people on the wait list as we're able to actively serve.
When they sent more dollars from the over expenditures, did they he and haw, or did they just do it?
They pretty much just did it, but they had to look to see if they had funds available, and they're statewide. At one point this year, we were at 110%,
Right.
something like that, overspending statewide.
Yep.
So they had 10% more spending than they had dollars to fund it with. And so that's when they stopped everybody from pulling people off their wait list in order to try and get those spending dollars down. And then as we got further along, then what they did was they said to those counties that were underspending, you will be giving this money to those counties that are overspending, and it was a forced reallocation,
It makes
Yep.
sense.
so.
Well, Ms.
Other,
Frazier, she wants some direction, so
so
we have to
can
come up
you
with the.
read what you put in terms of interpreting what I said? Since you're gonna,
The chair recommended as the children naturally come off each month that the daycare unit add on the work first CPS and foster children, that only, pull children off the regular waiting list if we receive extra money from the state. That was the
because your actions each month should net to zero growth.
As
Those
close
that
as
come
we can.
on equal those that
How you like
come
that?
off.
As close, I mean, some month you might be 2 over and some month you might be 2 under. I mean, you're just gonna have to look at the kinda, cause then how do I figure out which foster child I take on and which one I don't, you know, so
But can Kathy
We
and her
can-
staff
we can work it.
make that work?
we'll make it work, close as we
So
can.
Becky, you second that?
I second it, but yes, I do second it, and then I have a question
Well,
with the,
I had there was something I was wondering too about this piece about, within that motion, does it also need to be where we would direct you to reply to the state, you know, this issue where it was once approved and now it's not approved, so does that need to
You were
be
gonna-
also
you
in the
were gonna
motion?
write
I was
to
gonna do
give
it, but that
more
certainly
teeth-
would be-
Put more
So
teeth in
to
it.
let the
motion.
state know the changes
That's what I'm
we've
saying,
made.
there are 2 or 3 prongs
Yeah.
on this motion that,
It's stronger when the board says thou shalt,
Mm.
you know, as opposed to me saying,
well, thou goest and doest.
That works for me as an amendment to, that works to you.
I'm ready. We don't
As
have
an
a whole lot
it
of
amendment.
options.
definitely works.
I'm
Let me
ready.
ask
I'm
you,
ready.
Are you still asking? Are you through?
Well, and there would be 3 prongs, with one with the attrition, the other with the response to the state agency, and the third would be to get the statistics together in order to propose to the county commission for the upcoming budget, to present that as needed with those statistics to prove the point.
And I think that statistics would be best for beyond the county commissioners as well. But we don't have a lot of options. I'm ready. But we're gonna include everything.
So that would be a 3-pronged motion.
And then it's fine to report back as part of next year's budget, the status and moving forward, because maybe some miracle would happen. And
We'll do like
But-
when commissioners.
And we
say
got more
pray.
money, so then we wouldn't necessarily need it the same way next year, but to make sure this comes back up as a radar piece,
We pray.
How
especially.
would you slide in the teams that we have legal
Do we need-
custody of having?
you might want to add teens as they come in.
so-
We would assess to see if we have dollars available. They would be ahead of anybody else on the
So the
wait
teen
list.
parents are part of
Yeah.
it. Are you okay with that as the,
I am indeed.
okay, so then we have the 4 priority groups, CPS, foster care, work
Did he have his
first,
thing up?
teen parents.
Teen parents.
Wait a minute,
Yes,
we got
sir.
somebody sitting over there with their hands stuck in there.
I have a question for Ms. Elliott. In terms of a budgetary impact, when we say next year, are we talking about July 1, 17, 18 budget?
No, 18, 19. Yeah,
We
17,
all
18's over.
recognize next year's
17,
done.
18's done.
But all the policy things you're talking about today don't affect 17, 18?
It will have some impact, but what we're trying to do is limit that impact this year And as long as the MOE and as long as we hold tight, we think we can do it with minimal overspending, but we gotta be really careful, but we need to be working forward towards next year, yes. The following year,
We recognize you just did your budget,
right.
so we're talking the one 11
Yeah.
months from now.
I'd already figured that one out.
Okay, so, are you good with what you have, Susan? Okay. All those in favor of the motion, let it be known by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed? Do you have your marching orders now?
I do, thank you.
Good. All right, so now it's your turn again, the director's
Oh,
report.
okay, well, the director's report, really, there isn't a whole lot, I don't think. The biggest issue, Kathy, do you want to share, how NC Fast is going, or do you want me to do that?
We have 100% of our cases in NC Fast.
Woo, woo.
Yeah. Unfortunately, though, until they activate the cases, we have to key in the old system and NC Fast. Counties are being phased for activation. We thought it would be March 1st, but now Pitt County is August 1st for activations. They're in there, but until they actually pull the plug and activate them, we have to key in the old system and the new system, any changes. So if the parent switches daycares, the new daycare has to be put in NC Fast and the old system. Until they activate it and the old system is shut down.
So in September, the providers will be paid out of NC Fast for the first time. So 8 months after they were supposed to have been paid out of the system for the first time?
I think March.
Yeah, because we were initially
Oh,
told,
that's right.
we were initially told not to budget more than 6 months of child care money, and we budgeted the whole year. And now we've been told not to budget more than 1 or 2 months, and we've budgeted the whole year, just out of fear. So, based on the current situation. So anyway, they will go live, and we're very hopeful that the providers will get paid. The pilot counties had their first payments out of the system, and 95% of them had no problem. So they've worked out the bugs now. So
I
we are
get ready to say the
we are-
bugs are gone.
We're really hopeful that this is going to be the same as they continue to roll out. Okay, there is no application processing report card because the state still hadn't got that straight yet. The vacancy report, you can see we have been very busy, and we want to thank the manager a whole lot because he unfroze all of our vacant positions, and they are posted this week. I think we have something like 18 folks that have come to work, and we've got a couple more coming, so we have made a real headway on our vacancy report. So, and as also a thank you, the commissioners did approve 3 positions in our budget for this year. Thank you, commissioners. One is the foster care social worker to do nothing but licensing, and the other 2 were the child support positions. So they did approve those 3 positions. So a big thank you to them for that, because that was really important. So the only other thing I've got is legislation. The Senate Bill 546, which is the Accuracy Medicaid Eligibility Determination Bill, is still out there. It's still in the mix. We're continuing to work with Senator Heiss to try and get that changed somewhat, get it out of the budget if we can and into its regular committee process, because that is the bill that says that if there is an eligibility case determination that is made in error, the county picks up the entire cost of any payments that were made to an ineligible case. And so we really want that addressed. There's some language out there we're trying to get in there if we can't get anything else changed. Part of the problem is the bill did not go through the regular process, so it did not make crossover. And so that may be part of the reason why the senator's trying to leave it in the budget bill. But that's part of the negotiation. Senate Bill 427, which was the eligibility reform and the food stamp piece that was going to cut everybody off that were categorically eligible and do food stamp referrals, that has been removed from the budget bill, and we understand that is dead for the session. House Bill 608, Senate Bill 594, which was the Regionalization Child Protection Accountability Act, was in the budget. It has now come out of the budget. The money's still in the budget. There has been a lot of language changed with that. I sent it to y'all by email last night, but basically the big things for it were regionalization is no longer mandatory. There will be a study about regionalization. There were a few other little changes in there that we really wanted. Not exactly everything we want. It has now become House Bill 630. What they did was dump it into another bill that did make crossover so that it could continue on during this session. House Bill 630 was Ryland's law regarding CPS observation. So those have now all been combined, and it is now Ryland's Law Child Protection and Accountability Act. So it is moving through the process.
And your "we," when you say what we wanted, is the DSS Directors Group?
Directors group, board members group, and county commissioners
Okay.
group. So yes, I do need to explain that.
Just making sure.
One of the other issues that did change was that all the people who were on the work group, every association out there, you know, the Commissioners Association, various work groups, etc., were going to appoint their members based on the number of folks that the legislation said. The Board Members Association still has not gotten anybody on that work group, even though we worked really hard to have that happen. They are still part of the subgroups. The Directors Association went from being able to appoint their membership to the committee to having the legislature appoint their members to the committee. One of the changes that has happened in the last couple of days with the help of Senator Barringer was that the Directors Association now gets an additional member on the work group, and that member can be appointed by the Directors Association. So now we have 3 members on the work group instead of the 2. So that's a nice compromise. So that's what's going on with legislation. We didn't have a lot happen in the way of money changes. There's some exciting things in there, but not a lot specifically for DSS. One of the things that's there is that they are going to fund the corrective action plan for the DSSs as it relates to child welfare, because before that was not in the budget.
I think your clarification that you sent out was very helpful to all of us.
Oh, thank you.
And I just want to say that because as we forward them, and then the reply, and then that's what made Betsy Wells send out the letters.
Right.
When we got it.
Right.
So I want to thank you for that.
Thank you. The calls are still ongoing. We anticipate a budget will be done no later than the middle of next week. And my understanding is the goal for the legislatures to leave town by July, sometime early July. There is an expectation that there could be a veto of the budget, and that might slow things down. So we'll just have to see. But right now, they're working together. There's a couple of glitches, but that is moving forward. Everything else, I think, pretty much was in my written report. There's not a lot else I think I need to go unless y'all got a question about it.
A
Board
lot of
member-
hard work, Jan.
Thank
You are
you.
to be commended.
Thank you.
Board member comments, questions, before we move for a brief moment into closed session.
I've already said what I wanted to say.
Because we have some housekeeping with the annual evaluation for the director, we would like to go into closed session. Is there a second to the motion to
I
go into
second.
closed session? Can you read us into closed session, Susan?
North Carolina General Statute 143-318.11 regarding closed sessions, Section A, permitted purposes. It is the policy of this state that closed session shall be held only when required to permit a public body to act in the public interest as permitted in this section. A public body may hold a closed session and exclude the public only when a closed session is required. subsection 6, to consider the qualifications, competence, performance, character, fitness, conditions of employment, appointment, or conditions of initial employment of an individual public officer or employee or prospective public officer or employee, or to hear or investigate a complaint, charge, or grievance by or against an individual public officer or employee.
Mike, are we? Okay, we are now back in open session. There is no action to report. We have our next meeting July 11th, and at this point in time, we would accept the motion to adjourn until
moved.
July.
And I second.
All righty. See everybody in July.
I am ready for that.
You won't do that, did you, Melanie?
I always, when
I'm gonna let you do it
James and
next
Mr.
time.
Owens was up here, I always wanted
To whack
to have
it.
them whack